Welcome to the City of Greater Geelong's Planning Committee meeting number 222. The twos seem to be popping up a lot lately. Welcome to my fellow councillors around the room. We also would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting, and for me here in Lara it is the Wadawurrung people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to introduce to you the panel tonight. We have, I'm just going to go around the screen on my screen, Councillor Jim Mason, we have Councillor Belinda Maloney, Councillor Eddie Contell, Councillor and Deputy Mayor Trent Sullivan, Councillor Anthony Aitken, Councillor Ron Nelson, Councillor Sarah Mansfield. Thank you very much for attending, councillors. We also have no apologies at this stage. We do have quorum, so we will continue to move forward. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest? No? Okay, thank you. If it does arise, let me know. We have confirmations of the previous minutes, and they were held on the 14th of October last year. That was our last planning meeting. Can I grab a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mason. We might need Councillor Maloney or to move a second, because you were in attendance at that one. Thank you, Councillor Maloney. All right, all those are in favour of those. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to introduce to you the officers who are present in the Planning Committee meeting tonight. We've got Leanne Stockley, who is the Principal Planner. We don't have Hugh, I don't think. We have Joanne Van Slagren, who's the Manager of City Development, and we have John Rush, who's the Coordinator of Stat Planning. And if you see my eyes moving to my right-hand side, it's because I've got the two screens happening, so I've got everything going. So hopefully we can get that looked after. The procedure tonight will be that the officers will present a brief summary of the written report to the committee. The panel that can then ask any questions of the officers at that point, and then we'll have the objectors and submitters come into the meeting, and they'll have a 3-minute time limit for each objector or submitter. And as far as I understand tonight, we don't have the objector. I think they are an apology. The panel may ask, normally would happen, the panel may ask the objector questions, and then we would ask the applicant at the end to come and detail their application to us. And they've got about 5 to 10 minutes, and we've got 2 guests coming tonight. And then the panel can ask any questions of those applicants, and then we will further discuss, deliberate and make a decision. The decision of the committee tonight is the final decision of council acting under delegated authority. And if anyone is aggrieved by the decision of this committee, they may appeal to the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal in Melbourne, and our support staff can assist you for that process in office hours. The matter that we have before us tonight is an application PP 663-2021. It's an application for 10 Research Road in Lara. So Leanne, I'm going to hand over to you for the officers' report, please.
Yes, Councillor. The subject site is located on the south side of Research Road, 200 metres east of the intersection with Tower Hill Drive in Lara. The location is generally in the outer southern area of Lara, north of the Geelong Ring Road. The site is generally rectangular in shape, with a frontage to Research Road of 105 metres and east boundary length of 195 metres, equating to an area of 20,225 square metres, or just over 2 hectares. The site has a fairly flat terrain and contains a 3-bedroom dwelling with attached double garage in the northwest portion and a detached outbuilding. The property has vegetation across the eastern half of the frontage and a large portion of gravelled surface which is now semi-vegetated. The remainder of the property is vegetated with exotic pasture grasses, exotic and non-local native trees. However, the vegetation assessment found some patches of native plant species of wallaby grass within the southwest portion of the site. Immediately adjoining the site to the west are the boundaries of 75 and 85 Tower Hill Drive. These properties are developed with dwellings and shedding, there being some signs of small-scale livestock keeping. Adjoining to the south is 95 Tower Hill Drive, which is larger than the surrounding holdings and contains a dwelling, outbuildings and cropped paddocks. Adjoining to the east is 20 Research Road, which contains a dwelling and shedding. The southern portion of the property is used for boat and caravan storage under Planning Permit 31 of 2018. The permit requires the storage of caravan and boats within open fronted sheds in accordance with the endorsed plans under the permit. Aerial images indicate that this has not been complied with. The permit allows visitation for drop-off or pick-up between 6 a.m. and 7 p.m. The site also has planning permission for the use of buildings on the site for a cattery. The cattery has been in operation since 1999 or before that time. In January 2020, the property was also granted a permit for use and development for an animal therapy pool for dogs, and also an extension to the cattery. The permit has yet to be acted on, and if acted on, that use is restricted to just 2 dogs at any one time. It's also in operation between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Beyond the adjoining properties, the locality exhibits typical uses for the rural living zone within the municipality, being small-scale animal keeping of horses, sheep and other livestock, market gardens with either open or enclosed cropping, and lifestyle properties with spacious areas for paddocks or landscaping, which may also allow for large shedding of horses or vehicles for personal use. Generally, the properties in the area of the rural living zone are around 1 to 2 hectares, with development on the land being low scale, modest in size and materials use. Research Road is a cul-de-sac of 380 metres in length, with road reserve width of 20 metres. The vehicle carriageway has a gravel surface of approximately 5.5 metres wide, with informal swale drains either side. The application seeks approval for the development and use of the land for a place of worship within the rural living zone, and to construct and carry out works within the Environmental Significance Overlay Schedule 4. The proposed development is for a building to service a religious group who propose to host weekly activities and their community events. The building includes the following features: a main hall with dimensions of 41 metres by 14 metres, equating to just over 600 square metres, an additional wraparound veranda of just over 400 square metres, making a total footprint of just over 1,000 square metres. The height of the main hall roof line is 6 metres, and the height of the decorative entry element is 11.2 metres. Internal layout includes main open hall with stage and shrine, with rooms adjoining the space allocated to storage of meetings and other amenities. Plans nominate the materials as selected doors, window frames and columns that reflect the cultural, religious and customs. It's expected that the main building construction will be of masonry or other cladding materials. The building is proposed to be set back 10 metres from the east boundary and 72 metres from Research Road boundary. The application proposes vehicle parking in the frontage area, utilising the existing property access and providing informal parking to a new gravel area to cater for 30 vehicles. No new landscaping has been proposed. The proposed use for the place of worship includes the following details: Monday to Saturday, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m, Sunday, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m, and then 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. That weekday prayer will be up to 10 people, and the weekly Saturday evening worship and dinner for up to 60 people. There will be one annual festival during October. No external speakers are proposed, and no weddings or funerals are proposed to be held at the site. The application was notified to the public by letters to adjoining and surrounding residents, along with a sign on the site. One objection was lodged with council, raising concerns for the late operating hours, large number of people in attendance, potential for the proposed number to increase beyond the 60 with future growth of the group, building design not appropriate for the locality, traffic generation along unsealed Research Road, and that the location is inappropriate, and suggested that an urban location is more suitable. The application has been assessed against the zone, overlay and the relevant clauses of the planning policy framework in Greater Geelong Planning Scheme. It's noted that the proposal did not achieve the minimum submission standard for clause 22.71 for environmentally sustainable development. This is an initiative adopted by Council and included in the planning scheme in October 2019. The assessment has found that the proposal does not have the appropriate support within the relevant policies and as such cannot be considered an acceptable addition to the locality. Specifically, the rural living zone and local policy for use and development in the zone does not support non-residential uses that attract substantial numbers of people to the zone. This is due to the likely amenity impacts to be experienced by residents of the zone where there's an expectation of quiet rural amenity. The use and development form are more appropriately located in an urban zone where amenity impacts to surrounding uses are more appropriately absorbed by the urban environment and the development form more acceptable in surrounding urban character. Specifically, the intensity of the building form, footprint size, likely ability to accommodate more than what's currently proposed, and associated car parking are at issue. Overall, the intensity of the proposal is inconsistent with the zone and surrounding rural character. The assessment against policy provision in the planning scheme is supported by consideration of other similar uses and prior decisions within the municipality. Of chief consideration is the refusal of a similar proposal in the rural living area of Avalon. That proposal was progressed to VCAT for review, where the application offered to reduce the proposed intensity of use to less than what is being considered here. The Avalon proposal was also less intense as it proposed to use an existing building on the site by refitting a dwelling for the applicant's community purposes. On review and with consideration to the applicant's offer to decrease the intensity, the tribunal affirmed Council's decision to refuse the application. The tribunal agreed that the proposal did not accord with the purpose of the rural living zone and had the potential for adverse amenity impacts to surrounding residents when there's an expectation of rural amenity. Now there's further detail with regards to this particular tribunal decision on page 44 of my report. If I could take you there, I'll go to the last sentence on page 43, where I described that the tribunal considered what was put to them during the hearing. They considered a limit of 16 events per year. They considered events only to occur on Saturday, Sunday and public holidays and only between the hours of 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. They considered 3 of the events would allow a maximum of 80 persons, but the remainder to be limited to a maximum of 50. In coming to their decision, the tribunal gave the following reasons. Notably, and in contrast to, say, the residential 1 zone, this zone does not include a purpose statement which contemplates community uses or other urban non-residential uses. There is an apparent emphasis in the zone's purpose and provisions on residential land use and on compatible agricultural uses. From a fundamental land use planning perspective, there is nothing contextually in either the physical or policy sense that supports the establishment of this use in this somewhat isolated location. It will stand as an anomalous use within its environs. The visitation to the site by up to 80 people and the level of activity at the site will be a marked contrast with the quiet, semi-rural context. Such an outcome is not consistent with the purpose of the zone. Regulation of strict permit conditions to control amenity impacts may be an administrative burden to Council. Within a more urban environment, this level of regulation may not be necessary. The Tribunal also provided a similar decision in 2019, where the proposal for a place of worship was again considered to be inconsistent with the rural living zone purpose and provisions. In that case, in the Macedon Rangers Shire, the proposal was for the construction of an assembly hall and temple buildings of a combined area of 890 square metres, an overall height of 9.5 metres. The use proposed to have a maximum of 120 people once a month on a Sunday morning, and daily prayer for 10 to 15 people between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. One event per year would host 200 people between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. In that case, Senior Member Bennett and Member Sharpley determined the primary reason we cannot support the proposal on the review site is because it's inconsistent with the zone purposes and because it will introduce an intensity of activity which is at odds with the existing rural residential lifestyle character of the locality and the enjoyment of that setting by existing residents. We are concerned that approving an assembly hall and temple will undermine that character when there is no imperative for them to be located in the rural living zone. These two VCAT decisions and other local examples considered in the assessment report provide a framework for consistency in decision making for this type of proposal. Of note, existing similar proposals in the City of Greater Geelong have received planning permission where the use is of a significantly lesser intensity and in existing buildings that are part of the existing rural living character. I'll just take you to the table in my report in page 42 and just go through those other examples. The first one there being at 38 Pert Court in Lovely Banks has a maximum of 36 people, and that is a permit condition. That was in an existing building, which is part of the rural landscape and is significantly located away from other dwellings. That low intensity of use was considered acceptable. 85 Tilley's Road in Lara. This is the application that has been referred to in the applicant's report as the Buddhist place of worship. They have a maximum of 10 persons for the vast majority of the time, but with 3 events, the maximum of 50 people per year. 2 of those events are to be held between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. and 1 event from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. Again, this was in an existing rural outbuilding to be internally converted for their practice. Next, 31 to 43 Monastery Court in Lovely Banks. This application has a little bit of history to it in that it was originally proposed to Council in 2003. The planning office, I should say, this is a place of worship for, I think, the Greek community in association with their existing monastery that had been on the land for quite some time. I don't know the exact amount of time because I wasn't able to trace it back that far. I do note that the actual address is Monastery Court though. In 2003, the application for the additional buildings for the place of worship was considered by the planning officer where they recommended refusal. It was taken to a planning committee similar to this forum, but with 3 councillors. The officer recommended that the development is contrary to the purpose of the rural living zone and does not satisfy the objectives of design and built form and the rural living policies of the Greater Geelong Planning Scheme. That permit was overturned and granted by the councillors. The extent of works was not finished within the time of the permit and that permit lapsed. In 2015, they came back for a permit to finish those works and that was granted. Further down, we have 55 Lovely Banks Road. That application is for 100 persons and it is within an existing building that was previously used for over 60 years by the Hungarian community. The existing use of that by the Hungarian community for up to 100 people for a period of over 60 years weighed heavily on the decision making by the officer there. The last entry in my table is for Cousins Road, which is the Avalon example that I gave to you before, and have established that that particular example is of less intensity than this one that's being considered here today. Again, I must note that VCAT upheld the refusal of that. With regard to the relevant policy framework, and in context with similar proposal assessments and decisions, including decisions of the tribunal, it's recommended that the application is refused. Should the committee determine that the permit should be issued for the proposal, it must be noted that an extensive range of conditions is required to ensure the use and development can provide an acceptable outcome in the location. Such an extensive list of conditions is an indication that the proposal is not an appropriate fit to the location and has the potential to create amenity impacts. Conditioning a planning permit to such an extensive degree results in an administrative burden to council officers and an unwarranted burden of surveillance to surrounding residents who are likely to be impacted and will rely on council officers to rectify matters. This is a further indication that the application should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leanne. We appreciate the time you've taken to brief us on that. Councillors, I'm going to open it up for questions for the officers. Who would like to go first? Councillor Aiken.
Thank you very much, Chair Gressbeck. Leanne, I've got a number of questions. The first one is this land within the Northwestern Growth Zone?
It's not within the zone. No, it's not zoned as growth at this point in time. It is nominated in the Northern Growth Area.
Correct. Sorry, maybe that should have been my question. Is this area included in the boundaries of the Northwestern Growth Area that
yes,
we have?
It is. Yes, it is.
Isn't it also identified in that document that there will be a zoning change for this particular area?
Eventually, there will be a zoning change. It is part of a precinct that is last cab off the rank. I'd expect a 20-year time frame for that.
That's okay, but the zoning that's actually proposed in our concept plan is not to be rural residential. It is considered to be a buffer zone area, an industrial area for the future. Is that correct?
It's currently nominated as an employment precinct.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So thank you for that information. The next one is when making these assessments, do officers actually attend the site location or have officers actually visited the site?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and my next question is, have our officers attended the Thai temple that backs onto this site location?
No, that wasn't necessary.
All right, well, I mean, I probably beg to differ that because it is necessary to actually see that site location, because it is, which is what's causing significant confusion for the community, in that the Thai temple has three aspects. It has the Buddhist monastery, it has a public hall, and it also has the Thai temple as part of it, which is approved under a planning permit and neighbours onto this property. So I think it is appropriate that we actually look at that area as well too.
If it does assist, I did attend the site during that application process. Yeah. The officer was Claire McVilly, and I attended a site inspection with her as her driver.
And what policy documents going forward as well do we consider? Because just this week, Council has actually put out for community consultation our social equity framework policy. Now that policy talks about that every decision that Council makes going forward should actually embrace the principles associated with that policy. Now, I appreciate that the decision that you're making doesn't embrace that policy, but it is quite clear from the that particular policy that we are supposed to include the principles of social equity in every decision that we do make. and it may not be a question to yourself, Leanne, it may need to go to Joanne, the director of, the coordinator of planning. At some stage, would council consider that the social equity framework should be part of the policy framework for the Geelong planning scheme?
Thank you, Councillor Aitken. My understanding is that I don't believe at this stage we're looking at incorporating that into the planning scheme. However, the Planning and Environment Act does cover off all aspects such as economy as well as social. So they're already covered by all the decisions and policies that we look at.
But of course, it is a significant piece of new work that the council is undertaking. And I appreciate you're making a decision without that policy being adopted, but I think it actually probably does need to be considered in this case, and I'll make some statements on that a bit later. Look, thank you very much, and thanks, Leanne, and thanks for the council's indulgence with those questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Aitken. Any other councillors at this stage got questions for the officers? Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck. I've got a couple of questions on the neighbourhood character. I note that the boat storage area is supposed to have open shedding, and it doesn't. Have there been complaints about from neighbours or from anybody about this?
Thanks, Councillor Mason. Not to my knowledge, no, there has not been.
And I've got another question in terms of the character of the neighbourhood. I've looked at a map, a Google map, and south of this area, 10 Research Road, is it, or 20, whichever one? Further south, there is a large area of shedding. Is that still in the rural living zone, or has the zone area changed?
No, I believe it's rural living all the way up to the Ring Road, apart from areas to the west, which I believe are part of the Geelong Regional Employment Precinct, the Hills Road Precinct, if that's the large amount of shedding you're talking about.
It appears to be shedding joining very close to the Ring Road and directly south of 10 Research Road.
I can answer that, Councillor Mason.
Sure, go for
Thank
it.
you, John.
Hi, councillors. Look, that shedding is agricultural uses, so that's for horticulture. Yes, that's still there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Nelson, did I see you raise your hand?
No, Madam Chair, it was just to answer Jim's question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Contell.
Thanks, Councillor Grisbeck. Yes, just a couple of questions. There's been several examples of what's alleged to be similar types of developments. One being the monastery, the Greek monastery in Lovely Banks. That is a significant building there. I actually used to live just around the corner from there in Asher Crescent. Has there been any complaints that we're aware of for the activities that occur in that place of worship?
Thanks, Councillor Contell. I didn't investigate to see if there were any complaints there. No, I'm not aware.
Okay, thank you. In relation to the Avalon example, it seems or appears to me, at least when I look at the two applications, the Avalon application seems significantly more intense. They're asking for, or they asked for 16 events a year. I think this one only asks for one. The operating hours are pretty similar. A couple of hours on the top end that might be different. The amount of people, 80, and then 50 at other times. It just seems like a lot more saturated and intense type of development. Is it fair to compare it to what we're looking at here?
I would say it is fair to compare. The actual application, when it was considered at the tribunal, they had an offer to reduce the intensity, there were actually 16 events per year, with 3 of those up to 80 persons, the remaining 13 up to 50 persons. Now that's 16 times a year. The current application here is for weekly, so every weekend, to be up to 60 people. So that's 52 times a year. So yes, I would say that it is fair to compare. And I would say that just that consideration of the difference in numbers does spell out that the intensity of that application that was considered in Avalon was indeed less than what we're considering here.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And in terms of the rural aspects of the area, and you've suggested that you've been out there, and I went out there as well and had a look at the site. It certainly appears that it's in an area that is growing significantly with development.
I'm not sure in what particular location you're saying that it's growing.
So in terms of housing that's occurring in that area, the ring road and the noise levels that are coming off the ring road, it just seems to be a lot more of a built-up area rather than a rural setting.
Well, the rural living zone does allow for the use of dwellings on land that is greater than 1 hectare, and that use and development can be as of right, so not requiring planning permission. So I would say to you that the density is actually in line with the rural living zone and in line with what the preferred outcomes for the zone are.
Last one, other than the official objection that we received, was there any other negative feedback from any other residents or neighbours that we're aware of?
No, I didn't receive any other submissions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Contell. All right, unless there's any further questions at this point, Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Leanne, thanks for those comments about the objection. Were there any letters or emails of support for the project for neighbouring residents?
No, I didn't receive any submissions.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Aiken.
Thank you very much, Chair. Leanne, can you point out where the vegetation protection zone is on the property, and how much does it actually of the property is actually under a vegetation protection zone? Yeah.
Well, it's not a vegetation protection zone. It was as part of the applicant's vegetation assessment that they submitted. It was identified by the ecologist that there is some native vegetation in the southwest corner.
And how much of the property does it actually, are they proposing to, is their proposal building over it, or what are they proposing to do with that vegetation area?
Yeah, there's no development proposed for that area. They've just left that aside. The environmental health team and the environment team would like to see the wastewater treatment area, if approved, needs to be moved further away from it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney.
Hi there. I received an email from Chandra from BAPS, and he wanted to forward on, it was 25 support letters. Has anyone, other councillor, received these? I certainly have, and there's a hefty lot of people in there. We're talking Nepali community, Buddhist community, there's a John Aaron is in there, there's a laundry list there. So I'm just wondering where that's been put in the process. Anyone you haven't received anything to that note, Leanne? Or?
No, I haven't, councillor.
No, I know that I think most of us have received the same email with the letters of support, but I don't think they were put in as part of the application. I think that was a subsequent email to just councillors. John, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Maloney, too. It's good to recognise that we welcome letters of support as well as letters of objection. So when the advertising process occurred, it goes out to all the residents. So there were no support letters from the residents. Naturally, we get support letters from applicants as well, but they didn't officially come through the system. But just want to clarify that.
Thank you, John. Thank you. All right. At this stage, I think we might allow the applicant in. Council support, would you mind allowing the applicant in? I think we have Nikki Foster and Sitesh Bojani as well. So I think Nikki's just on audio at this point. So I would hand over to, once Nikki has joined, we might just give her a second. Welcome, Sitesh. Now, Sitesh, between yourself and Nikki, do you know, who, like you've got around 10 minutes or so to present your application to the committee. Did you want to start off or did you want Nikki to start? How would you like that to happen?
I'm very happy for Nikki to start if that's convenient for the council.
Thank you very much. Nikki, if you'd like to take yourself off mute so we can hear you, and then feel free to start your time.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors and officers, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of and in support of the application at 10 Research Road, Lara. My role as a planning consultant is to provide a response to council's recommendation and to hopefully assist in the broader understanding of the proposal and how it interacts with the site, surrounding properties, and sits within the context of the neighbourhood and zone. While there has been a lack of understanding around the use and purpose of the proposed mundir by council, I will defer to a senior member of BAPS, Sitesh, you've just met, to detail this further, and will instead focus on planning matters. First of all, I want to address that council has oversold, in my opinion, the rural location of this site, describing the area generally as hobby farms and lifestyle properties. And while at first glance at the out-of-date aerial image provided might suggest that this is indeed farming country, it is swiftly eroded if you look a little closer. 10 Research Road, Lara is located in an area earmarked for future development. Just 400 metres from the site at 50 to 70 Tower Hill Road, Lovely Banks, this has already changed to urban growth zoning in preparation for yet another change. Given this area is marked as a potential employment area, it seems that likely that non-rural uses will become commonplace in the future. 400 metres in the opposite direction from 10 Research Road sits the very busy and noisy Princess Freeway encompassing the Geelong Ring Road. Not exactly an ideal location for horses or farming or an idyllic rural lifestyle. A little closer look at the immediate area and touched on by council shows a not insignificant storage facility encompassing a cattery, a dog training facility adjoining my client's property at 20 Research Road, Lara. This facility is open most days and with generous hours as detailed in the officer's report, allowing potential for many people to be on site at any one time. There is noted to be no maximum patron number stated nor any noise mitigation implemented as part of the approvals that continue to accumulate for the site with 3 businesses currently in operation. Within the same aerial imaging, it is possible to see the properties with multiple car bodies and unofficial demolition operations in the area, and 2 properties have a concerning amount of rubbish and debris, most of which I've cited on my many visits to the area. One finds it hard to support the idea that this is a prime example of the aims and expectations of the rural living zone. By contrast, I have spent significant time in Lara, Lovely Banks and Avalon, looking at places of worship sites within the rural living zone, both refused and approved, as you cannot view 10 Research Road, Lara in isolation when considering comparable suitability. Council's report mentions the 3 that I will focus on this evening: the monastery that is able to be seen from the Princess Freeway and situated in a very nice area of Lovely Banks with beautiful homes and a mix of rural and urban views in the distance, and has no limit on patron numbers and generous hours as documented in the officer's report. I noted not a single urban or business use in this area, and in fact the only significant built form in this entire portion of Lovely Banks is the monastery. Moving away from the monastery and up Lovely Banks Road, you can see that 55 Lovely Banks Road, Lovely Banks also sits among what is comfortably known as hobby farms and lifestyle properties. Again, like the monastery, not a single urban or business use close by, and while it was utilised as a club, it had no formal consent due to as of use rights. Therefore, the same conditions must be considered when it was applied for as a place of worship. It is noted that the opening hours are more considerable than the hours proposed by my clients and for more patrons. Previous similar use or not, this site is deemed fit for up to 100 people all day and into the evening in a pristine rural living zone with no less than 16 objectors who did not see the previous use as justification at all. And yet 10 Research Road with 1 objection 400 metres from the urban growth zone and 400 metres from the Princess Freeway is somehow not. Finally, on the subject of the rural living zone, and largely because it has repeatedly been mentioned to justify Council's decision to recommend refusal, I want to touch on 10 Cousins Road, Avalon. Had my clients brought this property to me as a potential place of worship, I would have recommended they reconsider. I agree with the VCAT decision and Council, and having spent a number of hours in this portion of Avalon, I concur that there are indeed no urban or commercial uses in this entire area. It is, in fact, surrounded by hundreds of acres of farms with just a tiny pocket on this road of smaller rural lifestyle properties. It's not a suitable location, which is why it likely attracted 23 objectors. What perplexes me is the reliance on this almost decade-old refusal in a completely incomparable area, a significant distance from 10 Research Road, when you have two much more similar properties less than 4 kilometres away that have been approved for a minimum of 40 additional patrons to what we are proposing, not to mention the temple 400 metres away from the site. I would like to touch on a number of items within the report to explain our position and provide context and information for your decision. Council infers that the number of members wishing to attend the location for worship may grow, and this is entirely possible. However, this cannot happen without seeking an amendment to the permit, at which time Council could reject that if they deemed 60 would be the maximum number of patrons for one at this site. I wanted to touch also on the size of the mandir. It has been mentioned, and this is for worship needs, not for patron numbers. So during some worship activities, members would lie down, not stand up, and that's why the size is how it's been designed. There's a lot of mention of the temple form not having respect for the surrounding properties and the use being incompatible with the rural living zone. Clause 22.04. And I must firmly disagree. I also find it hypocritical that Council's own policy specifically mentions that animal boarding and dog keeping is discouraged while approving this exact use next door to 10 Research Road, and then somehow a place for reflection and prayer is not suitable. It is also quite insulting to suggest that a cultural building can be disrespectful in general. Cultural buildings are vital for communities and they do rarely look like a shed. For example, the monastery is a bright colour and its domes are clearly visible for many kilometres from their location. I cannot imagine anyone thinking that this form is disrespectful to the surroundings, just as this beautiful mandir proposed at 10 Research Road could not be considered disrespectful. Cultural and religious buildings have important elements within their design approach, and these can and do comfortably sit within various contexts. Clause 15 of the state planning policy specifically states that built form of cultural buildings are important to the general built environment. You cannot cherry pick small portions of planning clauses and ignore others. We also believe that 60 does not meet the definition of a substantial number, nor is a quiet place of reflection and intensive use. I note that Council has raised 2 clauses that were not raised during the entire application process. That's clauses 13.05 noise abatement and 13.07 land use compatibility. There is a lack of fairness in not requesting these be addressed and then spending 2 paragraphs in a report suggesting we are not compliant. I can also tell you that in almost 200 applications I have run, from farms to government buildings to banks to prisoner of war camps to apartment buildings, childcare centres and hundreds of residential homes, as well as 7 places for worship applications, I have never had to respond to either clause, and I believe this is because neither are relevant. I will say that my client is happy to provide acoustic reporting and employ sound dampening methods during construction if requested. Council have not requested any response so far on this item. In addition, this is a mandir, not a nightclub or a hotel. Worship is not allowed action and there are no speakers proposed on the outside. Clause 13.07 refers to industrial and intensive use in areas where off-site impact may occur, and that simply isn't a factor here. The proposal is compliant with both, and I have to wonder the intent of raising either in the report at all. I'd like to touch on the environmental sustainable development requirements finally. We provided to Council simple reporting, a storm report to show compliance and our intention to create best practice within the construction. Difficulty came that when we were finally informed that more information was being requested by Council to assess the ESD components, we were quickly informed after that that the application was recommended for refusal. BUPs do take their environmental work really seriously, and we are happy to expand on reporting and work with council departments on a positive outcome should this be approved. We believe that this important cultural community building is vital to the Geelong area, providing a much needed space for reflection, connection and worship. I've explained our compliance and the importance of cultural buildings for communities no matter their location, but also much more suitable, how much more suitable 10 Research Road Lara is to many examples both approved and refused but in particular that we have less patron numbers than both the monastery and the Sikh temples in Lovely Banks in more rural settings less than 4 kilometres from the site. We have complied with all required objectives of the state and local planning policy, received only 1 objection and sits next to an intensively used site. We hope that a sensible decision can be made this evening in support of this beautiful mandir, a quiet place for reflection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Sitesh, you've got about 3 or 4 minutes if you'd like to make comment.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd just like to briefly touch on a couple of issues that I think are really interrelated issues to assist in your deliberations. 1, some key insights into BAPS as an organisation. 2, what it means for members of the BAPS congregation to have this mandir in Geelong. And 3, what it means for the broader community to have this mandir in Geelong. BAPS is a socio-spiritual volunteer-driven community organisation dedicated to improving society through individual growth by fostering the Hindu ideal of faith, unity and selfless service. There are 2 aspects of BAPS that are crucial importance to understand for today's meeting. First, the spiritual role of BAPS. Secondly, the community service role of BAPS. On the spiritual side, members of the BAPS congregation aspire to attain moksha, which is a Sanskrit word meaning liberation of the soul. BAPS promotes individuals and families to lead pure, productive, addiction-free and spiritual lives to become upstanding members of the community. BAPS devotees see moksha by building, or seek moksha by building their personal close relationship with God, Lord Swaminarayan, through his ideal disciple, the Guru and current spiritual leader of BAPS, His Holiness Mahant Swami Maharaj, who has visited Melbourne and other parts of Australia on many occasions. BAPS also promotes seva, which is a Sanskrit word meaning selfless service, as a critical part of its faith. BAPS devotees are inspired by the lives of their gurus and by the guru representatives, the Hindu monks, to perform seva or selfless service for others and the community. For example, if you consider the life of the previous BAPS guru, His Holiness Pramukh Swami Maharaj, who visited Melbourne on 3 occasions in his life, he lived his life by the ethos, in the joy of others lies our own. Let me just repeat that. In the joy of others lies our own. And he inspired the congregation members to better the world around you by bettering yourself. His Holiness Mahant Swami Maharaj inspires congregation members to integrate into the community they live in and to promote peace and harmony. BAPS gurus or spiritual leaders also encourage and urge devotees to perform seva or selfless service for the community. Congregation members are inspired by their gurus to apply these lived examples into their own lives, into their families' lives, and to selflessly serve the community they live in. So turning to the second quick point, value of the mandir in Geelong for the BAPS congregation members. The mandir as a place of paramount peace is the basis on which these BAP virtues that I just mentioned are brought to life. A mandir in Geelong will enable local congregation members of all ages, including children, to experience on a daily basis the peaceful and serene environment of the mandir. As with other purpose-built facilities, the BAPS mandir as a place of worship is proposed on traditional architectural grounds and based on ancient Vedic scriptures. For congregation members, attending the peaceful grounds of the mandir and seeing its traditional architecture begins the transition of leaving behind the worldly worries, stresses, and to focus on one's relationship with God, and to go to a state of quiet contemplation, reflection, prayer, and rituals. And it's those rituals that, as Nikki has mentioned, do require size, and I can speak to that if you have questions. It is unreasonable and unrealistic to expect local BAPS congregation members to travel on a daily basis from Geelong to Mill Park for this daily 10 to 15 minute experience of their faith. In fact, during the COVID-19 lockdowns, local congregation members could not travel from Geelong to Mill Park. The inability.
Satish, sorry to interrupt you, Satish. Would you mind just wrapping that up for us, and then we can ask you some questions. Thank you.
Of course. Very happy to do that. In conclusion, I respectfully submit that the planning permit application for BAPS Mandir or temple at 10 Research Road, Lara, should be granted because the BAPS planning permit application meets all the relevant criteria as demonstrated by the materials provided and by the presentations given by Ms. Nikki Foster. The health, well-being and lives of the local congregation members will be enhanced by having a mandir in Geelong, and the broader Geelong community will enhance its vibrant and harmonious multicultural character. It will also benefit from more of the community service performed by BAPS congregation members as an integral part of their practice of their faith. Thank you, councillors, very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Satish. Now, councillors, I'm going to open up for questions of the applicant or any questions further of the officers while we have them with us. Any questions? Councillor Aiken.
Satish, correct me if I'm wrong, did the state government give your community funding to help assist to find a site location and planning in Geelong? Is that correct?
No, there's been no funding provided to BAPS. It's a volunteer organisation that gets its income or sources of revenue from the donations by congregation members.
All right, thank you. And Satish, can you tell us what other sites, apart from the Avalon site, you've actually tried to look at in and around Geelong?
Well, certainly, as you know, that there are other areas close by, but in terms of the other existing sites, I guess the places of worship that already exist there are the sort of areas that we've focused on to see that this is a compatible use of a place of worship in this particular area, given that the other places of worship are already there.
But you have been looking for, like, how many years have you been looking for a site location in Geelong? Yeah.
It's been quite a number of years. Sorry, I don't have the precise details, but it's been certainly a few years.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck. Satish, I'm really applaud your promotion of peace and harmony and the volunteer drive. I'm just interested in the fact that you're talking about 60 members of the congregation. And would have you, in the ideal world, looked for a bigger site and a larger building, or is this satisfying what you think is the need for the time being? We have a large multicultural community. I need you to explain to me why this is only 60 and not larger.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. Appreciate the question. BAPS certainly has larger mandirs. If you ever visit, then we'd be delighted to host you at the mandir at Mill Park. As with the rest of Melbourne and Australia generally, in regional areas, the size of the BAPS congregation is, not surprisingly, proportionately much smaller. And therefore, it's not considered that we need to have a bigger mandir at this particular site at all. And so that's why the 60 is completely adequate for our needs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Contell.
Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck. Satish, could you just explain what an event actually is? When you look at the word event, I think people would think, like a big festival. What is it? What is an event in terms of this facility and BAPS?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Contell. In terms of the event that we're talking about a Diwali and Ankut function. It's a it's an yearly event that will last to show appreciation and gratitude to God for the bounty that God provides us in terms of food. So an ankut is literally translated as a mountain of food. So a mountain of food is prepared and presented to God, offered to God for the blessings, to show gratitude for the bounty that Mother Nature provides us, and to offer prayers for that bounty to continue in the coming year. It's combined, it's the ankut presentation follows from the Diwali, the day before, which is the New Year celebration, which is effectively a victory of victory of good over evil, light over darkness, and knowledge over ignorance. So it really is a celebration of what is good in the community, but most importantly, it's a sign of gratitude, and reflecting that gratitude, it requires what it's really talking about when you say councillor as an event. It really is that demonstration, a visual demonstration within the mandir itself of the mountain of food offered to God and the chanting of prayers to God in thanks, in giving thanks for that mandir. People will dress up, obviously, because as one does for Christmas and New Year, one will get dressed up because of the special occasion and the nature of the event. But in essence, it really is about a joyous celebration by those people of that annual event.
Thank you, Satish. I'm sorry that I made you explain all of that, because now that you mentioned it, I'd suggest probably every councillor on this panel, if not most, have been to a Diwali celebration in the past, and many of us just in the last several months. So thank you for that. And it's certainly not a rock concert by any means. It's a very peaceful celebration. So thank you.
Yeah, if I could just say to that all of our events, as Nikki mentioned, the whole purpose of this place of worship is just that, is to take our congregation members, provide them with an oasis when they can get away from the material world, the stresses, the worries, and the tensions of the material world, and go to an oasis as a place of worship, of silent reflection, prayer, and contemplation. It is not, as you quite rightly say, Councillor, a rock concert by any stretch of the imagination.
Thank you, Satish. Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck. Just a couple of questions. Firstly, just around the objector, was any attempt made or any direct engagement with between the applicants and objector undertaken?
Yes, sorry. So I'm happy to answer that. So when we received the objection, we wrote a response. So how the objections work in Geelong is we don't, and it's pretty much blanket for all councils, is we don't get told who the objector is or their address or anything like that. It's a fairly informal process. Yeah. So what we do is we write a letter to them, which I did. So I wrote a full response, a very respectful response, because I actually think the objector process is really important with planning applications, so that you can try and create something that works for everyone. So we sent that response back to council, who I presume would have forwarded it on to the objector.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and there was no further engagement subsequent to that?
No, there wasn't. I think the main reason for that is that the opportunity to have a sort of discussion, which is, generally speaking, you wouldn't see a meeting triggered for less than 4 objections. Yeah. But normally, we would always participate in a discussion, which I think I had a brief discussion with John regarding having a meeting with once we worked out the decisions from council or how they were heading. I think there was discussion, but as per, I think, the information that we got, or the information in the report, at least from the officer, is that no meeting could take place because of COVID.
Sure. Okay. And the other question was just regarding there are a number of references made to, I guess, the potential administrative burden on council in enforcing permit conditions, and I think the implication there is that there is a high likelihood that those permit conditions may be breached should a permit be granted in this instance. So I think Councillor Mason's already touched on it, and Councillor Contell, just around the I guess intensity of visitation at the site and how that may be, you know, that I think it's the suggestion is that there is potential for it to exceed 60 people at different times, or exceed the other, you know, the number of visitors at other specified times. How, I guess, what certainty can you provide us that will be complied with and won't create an additional administrative burden for council officers?
I guess I could speak to the fact that this is overall my 11th place of worship application that I've worked on probably in the past 18 months. I've worked on another 2 with BAPS, and then for another different Hindu organisation, and we work for the Free Church of Tonga. We've got a whole bunch of different place of worship applications running. What I would say is that whenever you're running, well, first of all, let me speak to that. It's I guess going into it with the feeling that someone's being deceptive in how they're presenting an application is quite insulting, I suppose. What the organisation does is work out the needs of the families in the area, and these are family places of worship, and then they base their requirements on that. I can speak to an approval that was approved in the Green Wedge zone in a bushfire management overlay with heavy vegetation protection in Cranbourne South within the city of Casey that had 18 objections, and we had that approved in early 2021. I think it was February 2021. And that has a land management plan, it has a venue management plan, which is very normal for these types of applications, and they become part of the framework of how the organisation operates those areas. We haven't had a single complaint since that was approved, and that would have been watched very carefully because we had those 18 objections. All I can say is that I've found BAPS to be an extraordinarily generous, honest, transparent, respectful organisation, and I don't at any stage see that there would be any reason to think that they would be difficult to manage or that they would be overstepping what's permitted.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Do you have any further questions, Councillor Mansfield? Okay, thank you. All right, Councillor Aiken, we might wrap it up in a moment.
So, sorry, Chair. I actually would just like to ask Nikki, have the officer made reference to, and if councillors tonight make an alternative decision, that there will have significant conditions on that alternative. Has that been shared with you or your client to review?
No, we haven't been party to any conditions at all. I also noted that there was none of our documents on the agenda either, which is a bit unusual. So no, we haven't been sent any permit conditions to look over.
No, I just asked that because the officer actually did make reference to it in their presentation. So I think it probably is a bit of breach of natural justice if you haven't actually been given that to consider. Yeah.
John, would you like to reply to that?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for the question. And it's really great to hear from people and to share this sort of room, so thank you. Look, council officers have made a recommendation for refusal, so therefore that recommendation is before the council. If the council itself chooses to make a different recommendation, then that would come from the council. It wouldn't come from the officers.
Thank you, John.
So we could provide something to the applicant before we make a decision, Madam Chair? Yeah.
At this point, I don't think we would have the ability to be able to share that with them right now. But let's see what comes of any proposals or amendments going forward.
And I do just wish to ask another question, and John may be able to answer it. The Thai Temple Buddhist Monastery and Meditation Centre has had approval for about 18 months, and it is a neighbour to this property. Have we received any complaints or objections to that facility since it gained a planning permit from the city?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Aiken. I'm not aware of that. I haven't been looking up the complaints section, but sometimes you are made aware through the enforcement department. So it hasn't come to my attention there's been any complaints. The only complaint I was aware of in the beginning was there was a dispute between the two owners of the Thai temple themselves.
Councillor Gresbeck and I are very familiar with that, John. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Aiken. All right, thank you to our applicants. What we might do is just ask you to step out and we'll deliberate quickly, and then you will have a result very soon. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Councillors, at this stage, is there any other discussion that you would like to have in this meeting, or does anyone have a motion they would like to put forward? Councillor Contel.
I'd like to ask a question first, if I could. And I think Councillor Aitken, so the applicant is not in here at the moment, are they? It's just us and officers.
And it's live streamed, so it can be reviewed, yes.
Okay. I think Councillor Aitken makes a point that I have a desire to put an alternate recommendation up. That alternate recommendation is heavily guided by officers' recommendations. The applicant hasn't had an opportunity to see that recommendation. If I put the alternate recommendation up and it is approved, there may be conditions in there that may be unworkable for the applicant. If, again, it's supported to go ahead by the majority of councillors, I would suggest there's a desire for it to proceed. And so what I would anticipate is that there would be goodwill from the officers to work with the applicant to achieve the outcome.
So your question, Councillor Contel, would be to the officers for the alternate recommendation that you have right now before yourself, that you have shared, that you will share with us at some point. Is that above and beyond what you would normally put in terms of conditions of an approval of such a site? Is that the question you would ask of the officers?
I guess what I'm asking is that it seems quite onerous, this alternate recommendation, and whilst I'm wanting to put it forward and will put it forward for consideration, I would hate to think that it's so onerous that the development can't go ahead anyway because it won't serve its purpose. And so is there an ability for officers to work with the applicant if there was some critiquing that maybe had to occur to allow it to proceed in an operational manner?
All right, let me just get an answer to that, Councillor Aiken first. So Joanne, would you mind coming off mute and maybe giving us some direction there?
No worries, thank you. Unfortunately, I understand what Councillor Contel is saying. Unfortunately, we are unable to do that because this will be the final decision of council. It's a bit like a council meeting. Once the decision's been made, we can't go away and then make changes to it outside of the council meeting. And this isn't unusual in that we do any alternate recommendation that we put up for any of our planning committees since day one, we don't share with applicants or objectors or anybody else. They're what officers draft as a guide for councillors to make a decision on. So this isn't unusual.
Okay, Councillor Aitken is chomping at the bit
here. That's what, sorry, I was alluding to, and I do apologise, I couldn't spell it out precisely. I actually think we should slightly adjourn and give the applicant the opportunity and their representative have a quick read of the conditions, because I am aware of what Joanne has actually just said. We can't make retrospective decisions. What we make tonight is actually the planning conditions. I know it will put them under a lot of pressure to quickly scan through it, but listening to the applicant's professional representation, I actually think it's an appropriate approach to give them an opportunity to have a quick read, and we may be able to ask some questions about the alternative, as opposed to us in terms of a governance sense just going ahead and imposing conditions which mean that it is unlikely they could be met by the applicant. We do have, because this is a constituted council meeting, in essence, we can actually pass a motion to temporarily suspend standing orders, which actually could give them the capacity to have a look at the alternative recommendation, but it will, I suspect, push out the timelines that we're working on this issue now, and our time as councillors in this decision-making process. Yeah.
Okay, let me just hear from other councillors at this point, and then we'll work on a way forward. Councillor Maloney.
Thank you, Chair. I think that having a look through the alternate recommendations, it's a lot of aligning with the plans that we already have, ESD plans, waste management plans, things like that. So perhaps it is outlining the things that we need to comply. Anyways, it seems to be all in line with what we would be putting in other planning applications that I've seen. But perhaps other councillors have something different in perspective than I do.
Thank you, Councillor Maloney. Councillor Mason. You're on mute, Councillor Mason.
Oh dear, oh dear. Look, I've read the alternative recommendation, and I too, when I first saw it, thought it was onerous. But when I actually read it, I realised that it's pretty well standard. A lot of the stuff in there is what's normally required, and it is about sustainable design and landscape plans and waste management and hours of operation, which are just as we've already stated. So I think it's pretty normal, really, and it may be that the applicants won't want to go ahead with that, but as far as I can see, it's reasonably standard. And I don't mind if they want to have a look at it. But in the end, we've got to say yes or no to this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mason. Any other councillors wish to speak? Okay, Councillor Mansfield.
I guess the things that are hard for us to judge are there's the compliance with the different policy requirements that Councillor Maloney alluded to, and they make a lot of sense. But the restrictions on hours of operation and number of visitors and those sorts of things, and perhaps there wasn't completely clear in the recommendation, but I don't know if there's a recommendation to alter the footprint or the size. I can't quite determine that. But
yeah. So upon my reading of the draft alternate recommendation is that there has to be a certain amount of certain amount of the recommendations applicable to the environmental, the waste, the hours of operation, all of those particular things, and these are quite standard points in this particular resolution. So I'm quite comfortable that these things are not too far out of what we would normally put in. I think because it sits in a rural area, because it sits as a place of worship, there is some, talking about collections and delivery of restrictions, about not parking on road reserves. I think what we're saying here is that they're general in nature. Look, councillors, I would put to you that it doesn't seem onerous, but I'm open to questions. Councillor Aiken.
Chair, with respect to what you just said, the officer themselves said that the alternative was onerous. So maybe, Leanne, can you point out what are the erroneous clauses in the alternative, because that was the statement that was actually made by the officer. I don't think it's appropriate for us to say that it's not erroneous if the officer has already identified it that it is. So is Leanne able to give evidence to the statement that she actually made to the council group? Yeah.
Yep, sure. Leanne.
Councillor, I believe the statement that was used was extensive, not erroneous or onerous. It is extensive because of the number of conditions that are required to be complied with for it to become in any sense appropriate for the area. None of the conditions are erroneous or onerous.
Thank you. John, just a final comment there.
Just wanted to answer Councillor Mansfield's query, which is a good query too. with regards to the conditions and the hours and the days, all the conditions refer to what the applicant applied for. There's nothing any different to what they applied for. So if the council chooses to support an alternative recommendation, that recommendation is in line with what the planning consultant and what the applicant has submitted.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson, any final words?
Yeah, just a question, probably to John, is just in those conditions there, John, it says the approved use may operate. Is may must or may mean shall?
Sorry, what conditions? Sorry, there.
Sorry, hours of operation.
Number 10.
May operate between the following times. Does may operate mean must or may mean shall?
Thank you for the question. It's a nice one because it's a bit of a legal eagle because, of course, legalities fall on every word. So when we provide a condition, sometimes it does have a degree of flexibility and sometimes it's really very strict. And so in this particular case, the word may does say that it may operate between those hours. We're also reasonable to understand that sometimes that it might go 5 or 10 minutes over. So you may operate between those hours, and we appreciate that those things are going to happen in normal activities. So we're not there to be the, how would you say, the police on the hours at 8:01. So therefore they may operate between those hours. There's really no difference in terms of the word may or must other than the fact that we're enforcing the word must.
I think, Councillor Nelson, it does read may operate only between the following times. So I think that means that it doesn't have to be open at that particular time. It's the choice of them to operate during those hours. Councillor Contel.
Thanks, Councillor Grisbeck. Look, further to my question, the most value I got out of that discussion was the feedback that John Rush just gave us. Given what he has indicated, I'm comfortable now actually to put the alternate rec up for discussion and debate.
Okay, do you have a seconder for your motion, Councillor Aitken? Thank you. So, Councillor Contel, do you wish to speak to that motion?
Yeah, I will speak to it. I won't make it too lengthy. I guess I thank first of all the officers for the work that they put into the report, for the recommendation, and also for the information and feedback they have provided us in detail today. And I understand their position. But just like all of these types of arrangements, as would have been the case with the Greek monastery in 2003, councillors also need to consider other inputs. I valued the officers' input, but I also valued Nikki Foster's input. I thought that she brought some valuable information to allow me to at least consider it further, which was in line with some of the comments that I'd made earlier, but she articulated them much better in terms of the area that is being requested for this development, being that 10 Research Road, which is so close to the Western Ring Road, very close to other dwellings that are of all sorts of nature and business, with noise egressing from them. The amount of traffic that I saw when I was there already, the amount of new buildings that I saw, it certainly didn't come across to me as a real rural area, as I would compare the area that the Greek monastery is in, which I lived a street away from there. And certainly in the time that we lived there, which was close to 4 years, the nuns and the community that worked out of and engaged in that monastery were a really beautiful community. And the building, I think we'll all agree, because it's been around since we were children, maybe not the second one, but the first one, is actually iconic in the Geelong area. It really adds to Geelong. And you know, I think about the Macedonian community that have a church up on Ballarat Road. Again, very rural area. Again, an amazing community in Geelong that have contributed so significantly. I've been to that facility on so many occasions, and it's certainly a pleasant place to be. So in terms of the planning and objectives, I guess, aspects of this, with the alternate recommendation that's put forward, I'm not about to go through every condition because it sounds like from the discussion we've had, most councillors have read them. I think we go a long way to addressing the concerns that the objector had with traffic, with noise, with the amount of people, with the operating hours. There's some really stringent requirements there for them to meet. So I'm comfortable that we've met that. We're not aware of any other objections in the area. In fact, from what I'm being told, the other residents are quite welcoming of this. And if I go to the letters of support, which I know were provided after the application closed, Councillor Maloney referred to them, there's some 27 letters of support from reputable organisations, including the local member, John Aaron, supporting this development. And then just quickly on the spiritual side and community side of this organisation, you know, I read, I guess with acceptance and I guess a welcoming approach, the ethos of the organisation is empowering individuals to engage in projects that better one's community, country and the world. And, you know, they strive to care for the world by caring for society and families and individuals. I mean, I don't think we could ask for much more than that. And in fact, from what I've seen from this group over the years, and particularly in some of the activities that they've engaged with, you know, walkathons, raising money for charities, helping during the bushfires, providing meals during COVID, their activities in terms of blood donation and tree plantations. And I've even engaged in an Eastern Beach Australian cleanup day with them. I think the world would be a better place with more people like this community. So for mine, I'm actually very supportive of the application and think that it will be providing positive contribution to our region. Thank you, Councillor Contell. Councillor Aiken?
I reserve my right, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, any councillors like to talk to the motion? No? Councillor Mason?
Councillor Grisbeck, are we supposed to have invited the applicants back?
No, we can make this decision now, right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'll keep speaking for a moment. There's no need to add a lot more to it. I understand where the officers are coming from and the rural living zone, etc. But I think we have to look at it in the context of the actual character of that rural living zone and the actual future that it has that's been mentioned. And so without talking at great length, I support the alternative recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Mansfield?
Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck. And I'd just like to thank everyone who spoke this evening, our officers and the applicants. It was really, I think it was really well put cases on both sides. And I appreciate that the officers are presenting a case that is compliant with, you know, our existing planning policies and the requirements of the existing zoning. But I think, as Councillor Mason has said, and as Councillor Aiken alluded to, this is a changing area, and you know, I guess we have the opportunity to take account of that in our position, and you know, I think you know, there's I'm comfortable with the information that was given, that compliance with the permit requirements as well will be something that this group will undertake. It's always a difficult thing, but you know, I think you know, they've provided a good argument to suggest that this will not create an you know, additional workload for our officers in ensuring compliance with those requirements. I guess we'll see that in the fullness of time, but I'm comfortable with the arguments that have been provided. I think there's absolutely no doubt in my mind about the benefit of this particular facility, of the fantastic work that the group undertakes. For me, that's never been the question. It's really about the planning issues, and I think on balance, I'm I'd be supportive of the alternate recommendation that was put forward.
Thank you. Okay, no other Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I wasn't going to speak, but I'll be very brief. They say in planning that there are always winners and losers, but I think in this case, I think the community is a winner, and I don't think there are any losers at all. I think this is a great project, and I'm a little embarrassed that it's had to come to this, because I think we should be supporting this great indie community. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. I'll just say quickly before we head over to Councillor Aiken that, you know, I think that thank you, and as Councillor Mansfield and all the councillors have said, thank you to the officers and to the applicant, and thank you to Mr. Chan, the objector, for putting forward his objection. I think it makes for good discussion, and it makes for good decision making when you are able to weigh up all of the options in front of you. And yeah, I will be supportive of the alternative motion. Councillor Aiken, you reserved your right. Would you like to speak?
I will. Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I actually think all the councillors have said the same things. Leanne and the planning officers should be congratulated for putting up a very strong argument based on our existing policy position that council have, but we can't ignore the fact about what the current neighbourhood and lifestyle usage is now, not even just the future. We can't ignore the fact that a neighbour is a Thai temple and as living in harmony with the neighbouring community. I think we have to respect that lifestyle and neighbourhood character is very much determined by the level of objectors that you have by the community, and there actually was only one objector to this proposal. So in fact, I think that's a strong statement from the neighbouring community that they actually support the proposal, or we would have seen more than just one objector to it. So I think that should give us confidence that the lifestyle and neighbourhood of that area is actually not undermined by the introduction of this granting of a permit. And look, it has been touched on, the future neighbourhood is going to change significantly in that area. So it's certain we've strategically said it's no longer going to be a rural living zone going forward, and it's this usage is actually compatible with the urbanisation that's actually going to occur in that part of Geelong, even if it is 15 to 20 years since. And look, I touched on it in my questioning. Look, I actually think we do have to, the social equity framework actually has to be embraced into our planning scheme in Geelong. And that ultimately gives some leverage to our planning officers to understand that inclusiveness and diverse communities are actually a part of our planning framework. And I think out of this meeting, I would like Kylie as our chair to actually raise the issue with Gareth Smith, our director, to actually talk about how if we do adopt the social equity framework, how it can be embraced into our planning scheme. And as a consequence, we do take into consideration, does the issuing of a planning permit actually assist an inclusive and diverse community? And I think that that's actually an important strategic policy position and question we should be asking in all our planning decisions that we're making as a council, because certainly like the granting of a planning permit for this community usage is going to enhance our inclusiveness and diversity as a community. So I strongly support the alternative recommendation, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Aiken. Councillor Contell, did you have anything to wrap up?
Nothing further. Thanks for the indulgence and appreciated the deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors. I will put the alternate motion to the vote. Can you please advise if you agree with the alternate motion, please, by raising your hands. That motion is carried. Thank you very much, councillors. Thank you, officers. And that concludes tonight's Planning Committee meeting. Have a great night. See you soon.